For President Biden, he may not have announced his re-election bid just yet, but First Lady Dr. Jill Biden says he is ready to run.
Well, he says he's not done. He's not finished what he started. And that's what's important. And I think, look at all that Joe has done, has accomplished. I mean, he brought us out of the chaos. And he did that. He was elected because people wanted steady leadership. And I think they saw that in Joe, and they saw his character.
So is all that's left at this point is just to figure out a time and place for the announcement?
Pretty much.
Pretty much.
I love it. Let's bring in staff writer at The Atlantic, Mark Leibovich. This morning, he's got a new piece that makes the case for a primary challenge to Joe Biden.
And very interesting, he's known around The Atlantic as Mr. Steady.
Yes.
So that's
steady
what we call
as he
him.
goes.
Steady as he goes.
Also with us, senior political columnist at Politico, Jonathan Martin. He has new reporting on private concerns lingering from some senior Democrats about Biden's age. And Mark, you argue this in your new piece, quote, there has to be one good challenger, X, out there from the party's supposed deep bench, right? Someone who's compelling, formidable, and younger than, say, 65? Someone who is not Marianne Williamson? Someone who would be unfailingly gracious to Biden and reverential of his career, even while trying to end it? Challenger X could earn goodwill by campaigning with class and expressing unrelenting gratitude to Biden. She could simply nod and shrug in response to the various admonitions, emphasize her own credentials and the grave threat posed by Trump, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, or any other Republican. Say repeatedly that she would do whatever was necessary to help and support the president if primary voters nominated him again.
I mean, they could do all of that. At the end of the day,
mentioning it's a she.
At the end of the day, he or she could do that. But Mark, the argument that I usually hear from Democrats are, he beat Trump. If any of those other people had run against Trump, Trump would have beat him in Wisconsin, would have beat him in Michigan, would have beat him in Pennsylvania. So, is there not a stronger argument in a Democratic primary? Then I beat Trump. I mean, what beats that argument?
Well, what I think that's sort of voters get to decide that. I mean, he beat Trump in 2020. That was, I think, the crowning achievement of Joe Biden's career. And he might be called upon to do it again. I mean, that, could be his main argument. What I'm arguing is that he was sort of running as a bridge in 2020. At what point, when you're in your 80s, does this become a bridge too far? And the she that you were mentioning before. I mean, I was mentioning a bunch of names. Gretchen Whitmer happened to be the previous person I mentioned. So that explains the pronoun. I'm not favoring anyone here. But I do think that, look, I mean, Democrats have a very unique situation. I mean, yes, there's a tradition, certainly over the last 30 years, that presidential incumbents don't get primaried. And there's for good reason for that. I mean, it's very harmful to the incumbent. But ultimately, Democrats with Biden have a very unique situation, which is that, one, there's this incredible disconnect between the gratitude that most Democrats have for Biden, his career, the last few years, and how many don't want him to run. I mean, this is over 50, even 60 in some polls percent. And the other part of this, is that, it's the age question, which I know is uncomfortable to talk about, but, it's a huge issue for most Democrats.
Well, I don't know if it should be. I think age is what it is, and we keep telling people what it is when we shouldn't be. Well, I mean, there are some people who are at their best in their 80s.
Nancy Pelosi.
My mom was using a chainsaw and doing her best work in her 80s.
Nancy Pelosi, without chainsaw, was doing a pretty damn good job in her 80s
Different
as well.
type.
So, Jonathan Martin, though, what I find so fascinating about Biden is he is the most underestimated guy I've ever seen in my life. Like the Democratic Party, he loses Iowa, New Hampshire. He's mocked and ridiculed. We all remember that on Twitter.
We're going to do this again?
This guy's going to get destroyed. Right. He wins the presidency. They worry about the debates. He's too old. he wins the debates. They worry about 2020, he wins 2020. They worry about legislation. They say, oh, you're trying to deal with Republicans. Old man, you're from a different era. And then he rolls up more wins than any Democratic president since LBJ. Then we heard it about 2022. Then we heard, I hear it every 3 days. Then Democrats start whining after a historic midterm. Oh, but he is too old. Then he shows up in Kyiv.
Yeah, you're looking for problems.
Seriously, how long? But you hear this all the time, don't you?
No, it's extraordinary. And if you want to know why Joe Biden has a chip on his shoulder, it's precisely because of what you just laid out, Joe. Because he feels like going back to 2019, he's been underestimated. Primary, general, legislative agenda, midterms. The whole chronology speaks for itself. So, yeah, he's got an obvious rationale and motivation, frankly, to run for re-election and defy his critics. I actually think, Joe, if it wasn't for that midterm performance, there would be a much more public chorus of Democrats calling for Biden not to run again. Because of the midterms and because of Biden's wins on Capitol Hill, most of these concerns are now in the shadows of background quotes and off-the-record conversations over drinks. But they haven't stopped. And the reason they haven't stopped, Joe, is because people are looking towards not 2024, they're looking towards 2026 and 27 and saying, can we have a president who's going to be in his mid-80s and serve a full 4-year term? And I think that's the concern, is how do we figure that out in a really respectful, sort of cautious way? And it's not easy, in part because if you don't nominate Biden, Joe, who do you nominate? And that raises even more delicate questions about the VP and about the other folks who potentially would run. So it's a real minefield for the party right now.
So, Mark Leibovich, the last time a sitting Democratic president had a challenge was 1968, Lyndon Johnson. And there was a pretty significant issue that his challenges raised. It was called the war in Vietnam. What issue would they raise against Joe Biden?
I think they would very diplomatically talk around the age issue. I think, look, there are two larger thematic things here that a Democrat could conceivably run on. One is freedom, and the other is choice. I mean, Democrats deserve a choice to have the freedom to vote for a president that most of them don't want to see running again. I mean, that is essentially what we're talking about here. We're not talking about someone who is out to destroy Joe Biden. We are looking for someone, I think a lot of Democrats are looking for someone to give an alternative, to actually make an argument. I completely get why a primary challenge is to be resisted at all costs. If you work for Joe Biden, if you are Joe Biden, if you work in the White House, if you work at the DNC or whatever. However, I also think that sorry, got the earpiece problem here. I also think that this is a time for sort of fresh thinking, and again, the age issue makes for kind of an extenuating circumstance that the Democrats have been ignoring, have been talking quietly about, and probably should deal with at some point before it's too late.
And Jonathan Martin, talk about those concerns about Joe Biden regarding him surviving the term intact. You know, people saying not that maybe, you know, he doesn't pass away, but maybe he spends his last year or two like Woodrow Wilson. We hear all the concerns. We hear the concerns about Kamala Harris not being a popular vice president, and that Republicans are somehow going to use that against Biden in the 2024 race. Right.
No, that's exactly right, Joe. You can sort of see the talking points being devised right now by the Republicans, which is to say that, you know, the choice is not going to be Biden or Biden or GOP candidate X. It's going to be, you know, folks, you aren't voting for Joe Biden. You're voting for his VP, Kamala Harris, because the president is not going to be able to serve a full 4-year term. Those talking points are coming, I can guarantee you. And I think that's why Democrats are certainly alarmed right now. Joe, that said, I think that Biden is brushing this off. I think he is primed to announce his reelection in April. I'm pretty skeptical that there's going to be a serious Democratic challenger, at least in the short term. What I'm curious about is this. What do Democrats do if by this fall it's clear that Trump is not going to be the Republican nominee? That's the only scenario I can see in which Democrats do have second thoughts about Biden, is if Trump is so clearly damaged that it's going to be somebody else that's not Trump. In that case, do Democrats start to wonder, hey, is it in our best interest to nominate an 82-year-old for our party next year, or should we open it up for a primary? The challenge is, how are they going to know that Trump is really damaged, and by what point in the calendar does that conversation take place? Because it could be too late in the cycle.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. And Mika, last week we showed polls that showed more Democrats want Joe Biden to run for president than Republicans want Donald Trump.
There you go.
A lot of questions out there, but I agree. I don't think there's going to be a challenger to Biden-Harris. I think they're going to be the ticket. If Trump, for some reason, gets out of the race, which don't see him doing right now, maybe that changes things. But if not, I think we've got a rerun of the 2020 matchup.
Politico's